Call to order. Okay, I'm calling this committee meeting to order. Please stand for the pledge of allegiance.
Of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
There is no public comment for period number 1.
So it takes us down to the discussion and information section for this evening. So we have one presentation this evening for our Ed Services Committee, and I'd like to invite our Director of the Office of Teaching and Learning, Mrs. Stephanie Petrie, to the podium this evening to deliver a presentation, which we hope engages our board, enlightens our community a bit, and certainly feel free, as this is a committee meeting, to stop Ms. Petrie at any point in time if you have questions or need additional information in some of the areas that she's going to be touching on this evening. So, Ms. Petrie, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, David Heiser, and welcome back, everyone. Happy New Year. Hope you had a nice holiday season. So tonight's presentation is really an update and overview on some of the things that we began the conversations about when I did my initial presentation in the fall related to data. So I just want to give you an update on kind of where we are with some things and some next steps. So our first topic is our 6-year curriculum review cycle. So this is a system that I want to share with you so that you know what the process looks like as far as we look at our curriculum and how are we equitable about that across all content areas. But the key things are that it really is a continuous improvement. We're constantly looking at what our data is telling us. We're looking at what our resources are and where there are strengths and where there are needs. So if you look at the continuum, you can kind of see within the 6 years all of the different things that fall within those pieces. The whole time there's a professional learning involved because we want to make sure our teachers have all the skills and the things that they need in order to implement the resources and the curriculum that we have embedded. And really looking at, as you finish that cycle, years 5 and 6, evaluating our programs, evaluating our resources, monitoring, adjusting, and then as you start over again, assessing where are we at with our curriculum and our resources, is there something new that we need to explore, or what we have been doing is getting the results that we would desire. So some critical things to take a look at as we think about that cycle. I want you to take a look at this chart. And what this does is outlines the next 6 years for our curriculum review and which subject areas would fall within those categories. And I'm going to talk mostly this evening about ELA because of some other things related to some of our Act 135 updates, which we'll talk about in a minute. But if you look at this cycle, you will notice that each kind of content area is at a different point. If you notice that there are some red highlighted years, those years are where there are potential curriculum adoptions, which could have budgetary considerations involved. So year 3 is a year that would be an implementation of a new resource or a new type of tool that we'll be using to support our students' learning. When we think about that cycle, by the time year 5 gets around, we're evaluating the implementation of that resource and assessing whether we need any supplemental resources to help support our students. So that would be a year where we potentially maybe have a little bit bigger purchase to help support that if the data showed us that that's something that we would need. Key pieces of this whole process is that there is a team that puts together this information. So those teams need to be a diverse group, thinking about across all of the elementary schools would have representation. At our middle school levels, both middle schools will be able to have a voice within their curriculum. Our coaches, administrators, and our BASH teams would include all grade levels and content, so we can really take a look at that vertical alignment to ensure that the curriculum we have is moving along and progressing appropriately, and we can have those conversations to support students. So just some key components as we look at this is it's a collaborative approach, a lot of different views and input as we make decisions about our curriculum. It's data driven, so our students' data is going to drive our decisions to determine what type of resources should we be using and making sure that they are research-based and best practices. We want to make sure that we are doing a sustainable approach. So the reason for that rotating review is that we're not at a year where every content area needs to get new resources at the same time. So how do we develop a cycle to make sure that that is not a huge fiscal struggle for the district? Making sure that we're sustainable, we're looking at that professional learning component throughout the whole cycle, and we are very transparent to the school board and the community so that they know what the process looks like and what pieces that we are reviewing and taking a look at. Our professional learning days would then continue to be focused on meeting our teachers' needs to make sure that they can support that growth and implementation of any resources that we would have. So that leads to why I said the ELA is going to be our biggest point of conversation related to our curriculum review cycle. So this year there's been some updates to school code, and I wanted to review with you from the state what are some of the expectations as a school district that we need to do. So this current school year, all LEAs, school districts, need to report to the state about what current resources we are using for ELA or reading instruction to the Department of Ed. So they're collecting what all districts are doing. During the 27-28 school year, all LEAs must adopt an evidence-based reading curriculum. They need to identify a lead educator to assist with that curriculum implementation. There needs to be PDE approved professional learning for structured literacy, and each educator which falls in that continuum must complete that by the 28-29 school year. We need to be able to implement a K-3 universal screener for reading 3 times a year. And that screener, which we'll get to in a little bit to kind of give you an idea of what that looks like, the goal of that is to identify students with a reading deficiency, develop a plan of support for those students, and then submit annual reports to PDE. So this is a timeline that we need to be following according to our new code updates. So if you come back to our curriculum review cycle, that adoption of a new resource in 27-28 is directly aligned to our curriculum review cycle, which will be evaluating those resources, our current curriculum, and looking at what is that resource that we want to adopt in the 27-28 school year. So budget considerations. I want to share these things with you as we look into the future and we plan accordingly. So the use of a universal screener. This past year, we used a Dibbles 8 paper pencil universal screener. It is a free version that we were able to get off of the University of Oregon. It pretty much just gives you the screening information. So those really looking at that on fire, if someone is meaning, if a student really needs support, you notice those pieces. So M-Class is an example, not necessarily what we are going to use, but an example of a screener that uses Dibbles 8 and then takes that data and provides another layer of kind of support or recommendations for how to support that student as a reader. Looking at the cost of that, M-Class is $14.90 per student. So if we did just the K-3 recommendation, that would be a $25,000, $330 investment in our students as a universal screener. So this is just an informational piece to you as we look at adopting a universal screener, what that data tells us and how we can use that to inform our instruction. Our reading intervention plan, which is another piece that we'll need to be implementing, is going to be tied to our MTSS implementation, looking at the data collection tools that we're using and are they giving us the information that we need to help support our students. The lead educator that we would need to implement in 27-28 is, what my recommendation is that we look at an elementary curriculum lead, kind of like a department leader, which we have at the secondary level. We don't currently have any department leaders at the elementary school level, but this is a stipend position, which is $1,150. So if we identified one curriculum lead at the elementary level, that would be a $6,900 investment during the 27-28 school year. During that 27-28 school year, we also would have the resource adoption, and that cost will be to be determined based on which resource that we choose. Our teams of curriculum development, the teachers involved in that, typically a lot of that work is done over the summer. So there is some hourly rates for the curriculum teams over the summer. We can utilize some of our administratively directed hours, which would typically is about a day that we have to assign over the summer. But we do anticipate that that work will be more than one day because we really want to make sure we're thorough and evaluating where we are and how we're aligning to the state standards. And then continue professional learning for our staff to make sure they are staying current with the resources that we're using and being able to fully implement whatever resource that we would adopt looking into the future. So now as we talk about MTSS, this is something we talked about, and as a reminder, it is part of our strategic plan by the 29-30 school year to have a fully implemented MTSS system. This current year, we're really spent a lot of time looking at Tier 1 instruction and making sure we are solid in those practices. I wanted to highlight a little bit related to Year 2 as we approach, the middle of the school year here and heading into next year, some things that we're going to be taking a closer look at and keep us looking forward. So we are going to continue to strengthen and improve the instructional practices within our Tier 1, meaning typical that Tier 1 classroom environment, and looking at using those evidence-based resources. We are going to be looking into some structured literacy pilots. So this is the potential adoption of the 27-28 resource. So we'll have some teachers do some pilots this upcoming school year to make sure we're making an informed decision on that resource that we would invest in. Looking at our consistent data analysis and making sure that we are having those conversations about how we are supporting students, taking a look at the ELS screener data that we have, and also starting conversations related to a math screener to make sure we are identifying needs in math as well. And looking at the tools that we are using to collect that data to make sure that it is being used to drive our instruction and support students so that we can continue to move through the MTSS support process. The other big piece is school-wide behavior expectations. So this current school year, all of our elementary schools have teams being trained in PBIS, which is positive behavior intervention and support. So at the end of this school year, they will be developing and implementing a plan for the upcoming school year. So our middle school teams will be getting that training and putting that support in place for the 27-28 school year. The high school would be the following year. One of the pieces that we are going to continue to explore is how do we collect that data? This is information that's sometimes hard to articulate. It's not like a test score where you can identify those success criteria. So there is a program called SWIS that we are going to continue to take a close look at and explore. I've heard really good things about it as far as being able to assess positive behavior trends to measure the implementation of a PBIS program. So that's something that we're going to take a little bit closer look at and determine, would that be able to provide us with information to say we've been successful with this implementation of a program, or is it able to help us identify what maybe trends or needs we may see within our buildings to help support that behavior expectation across the buildings and across the district. So just as a reminder, our Tier 1 support, when I talk about that, that's the base that 80% of our school with that Tier 1 instruction should be able to perform successfully at that level, whether it's academic, whether it's behavior, whether it's social emotional. So what I'm going to share with you is some of our data. So our screener data, like I talked about, was our DIBELS 8 data. So in my presentation in the fall, we did not have this data to share with you yet. I do have that to share with you. And then we're going to revisit our IXL diagnostic fall data compared to our spring PSSA data, just to kind of give you an idea of where we are and why there's this need to be taking a look at our intervention supports and providing additional support for our students. So our first image here is our DIBELS 8 beginning of the year data. So when you think about that 80% of students should be successful at that Tier 1 core instruction, that is our green and blue numbers when you look at the charts. So taking a look at this screen, these assessments were the beginning of the year, meaning the first couple weeks of school. So there has not been a ton of instruction from our teachers at this time. It's really assessing where are students coming in and how do we know who may need more support than others. So if you look across our span of grades, the first column is kindergarten. So thinking about as our students enter our buildings, what are they coming to us? What experiences have they come to us with that expectation of where they would be in kindergarten according to the Dibbles 8 screener? So you can see how that progresses over the course of their 6 years of elementary school. So reminder about a screener is that a screener is, again, looking at, like if I have a temperature and you want to know what's wrong, maybe you would go to the doctor and say, what's causing that temperature? So this is telling us that maybe there's something that we want to look a little deeper at. So the other pieces of data, which we had talked about in the fall, that can help us determine that are our diagnostic data. So this image is an example of, on the left is our local diagnostic, our formative data from IXL, which is a program that we use to help us kind of measure our students' progress throughout the year. The image on the right is our end of year PSSA data. So like we talked about in the fall, our percentages of where students ended the school year and started the school year are fairly close based on the data that we've collected. So this is an example of our elementary ELA data and those two comparisons. When we look at our middle school ELA data, again, fairly similar to where students ended the year and then started the year. The next two pieces of data are our math data, which will show you, again, a similar trend from our PSSA summative end-of-year data compared to our formative data as we started the school year. And then our middle school math data, again, fairly similar where this data is sharing with us. So the reason I wanted to show you the math comparison and the ELA comparison is as we think about what do we do in addition now to that core instruction, we're recognizing our data is telling us we need to do some extra intervention. So currently the structure of intervention in our buildings is set up based on size of buildings, because obviously our smaller buildings have less students, our bigger buildings have more students. And also tied to some of our Title I support, which I'll talk about in a minute. So at the elementary level, you can see the breakdown of number of intervention teachers and reading specialists at all of our elementary schools. At the middle level, East has one intervention teacher, West has an intervention teacher and a reading specialist, and our high school has one reading specialist to help support that progress. So there are more interventionists and reading specialists at the elementary level, and really that reason is so that we can support those foundational skills for both reading and math as best we can. Most of the time spent with our intervention teachers right now is in ELA. That's been the historical kind of structure that we've had it set up. But as we think about that data that we just looked at, that does tell us we have some needs in math as well. And we want to make sure we're supporting both of those areas. So this, I know it's small, but hopefully you can see it on your computers a little bit closer. This breaks down the current Tier 2 support. So meaning students at each of our buildings, at each grade level, that are receiving additional support from one of those intervention teachers or reading specialists. So as that breaks down, you can see the percentages at each grade level, that's receiving that Tier 2 support. At the bottom chart, that's our middle school interventions. So if you look at ELA, both Middle School East and Middle School West are able to provide that support. At this time, we are only able to provide the math intervention at Middle School West because they have both that reading specialist and that intervention teacher. And I'm going to explain to you why in just a minute. So just personnel-wise, one person supporting intervention in the building, it's really tough to be able to provide both of those interventions at that level. So one of our other current challenges in relation to our intervention, and I do want to thank the board for thinking about substitute support and thinking about that compensation. So just a little peek behind the curtain of what happens if a classroom teacher's out and a sub doesn't pick up that classroom at the elementary level. an intervention teacher or reading specialist, because they're not assigned to a homeroom, and children obviously need a teacher with them all day, gets pulled from those intervention supports to cover our classroom if we don't have a substitute. So the example on the screen right now is, I pulled Boyertown in Washington Elementary School because for this first trimester, neither building had a building substitute. So what that meant was those teachers were pulled more than the other buildings because there wasn't that standard person on a daily basis able to cover a classroom. But the key is, how did that impact our ability to administer intervention? So at Boyertown, there was 30 school days impacted, which equated 224.775 missed sessions of intervention. So we think about providing consistent support to students, it definitely was interrupted. So something for us to consider when we're thinking about how do we support our buildings and thinking about those pieces. At Washington, it was 29.4 school days impacted and 254 sessions that got missed because of that sub-coverage. This also impacts our special area teachers. They often are pulled to do that too, so students lose that opportunity. On top of that, the paras that support our intervention and reading specialists, if there's a special area teacher pulled, those paras then often cover that area, so the teachers, the students can experience it to a certain degree, but then that also impacts that support. So just helping see the big picture of how all of those things play together. So tying back to why does Middle School West have an intervention teacher and a reading specialist? That is part of our Title I federal funding that we receive. So the Title I federal funds covers a reading specialist at all of our Title I buildings, which includes Boyertown, Colebrookdale, Earl, Washington, and Middle School West. So that reading specialist at Middle School West is funded through our Title I funds. The intervention teacher is funded through our district funds. So just to help you see kind of how those numbers support in those different areas. So budget considerations, again, thinking about looking at the number of students we're able to support within the capacity that we have. You know, we really feel that there is a need to be able to truly implement MTSS in a full capacity in the 29-30 school year, that we increase our intervention support at both the elementary and the middle school level. The reason I have elementary based on need is really ties to certification. So at the elementary level, your classroom teachers, your elementary teachers certified in all subject areas. At the middle school level, they're certified in a subject area. So we recognize there's definitely a need to do some support and intervention in math at the middle school level, which is why, as I talk about these budget considerations, that's why I'm tying math to the middle school level. The elementary would really need to use their data at their building to determine what type of interventions need to be provided. So if they notice a trend in a certain grade level that might need additional support in ELA, maybe they adjust their supports to make sure those students get what they need. Or maybe the data is showing that they need more support in math. The teams would have to really look at the data, determine where the needs are, and use those personnel to do that appropriately. But the data is all driven by all of those pieces. And at the elementary level, there also may be some behavior or executive functioning skills that might need to happen at that tier 2 level to help students be successful within the school environment. So this is what I'm proposing as we look at the next 4 years. I'd like to request that during this upcoming school year, upcoming budget cycle, we consider adding 3 intervention teachers, 2 at the elementary level, and then 1 at the middle school level. The following school year, 2 additional elementary intervention teachers and a middle school intervention teacher, which would be able to provide at the middle school level by the 27-28 school year, they'd be able to have both buildings would be able to have a designated math intervention support there. By 28-29, the additional 2 elementary school intervention teachers, which at that point would give us an additional support at each of our elementary schools, so that by the time we reach the 29-30 full implementation of MTSS, we would have additional support to be able to address the needs of all of our students in our buildings. Are there any questions about any of those pieces before I give the Magic School AI update? I know that was a lot of information.
Could you please go back to the performance slide.
Mhm.
I had some questions about
Which, does it matter?
Dibbles.
Yep.
Dibbles 8 that
Yeah.
you're using. You had indicated that you're using a free version
That's correct.
of that. In the past, Dibbles has primarily been a primary screener that pretty much looked at fluency, the primary fundamentals of reading. And so I see that you have grades all the way up to 8th grade.
That's 5th grade.
5th grade.
Yep,
I'm
K to
sorry.
5, yep.
So, we have the fundamental building blocks, K through 2nd grade, where students are learning to read. But from 3rd grade to 5th grade, you're reading to learn.
Correct.
And that's where the comprehension skills are important. So my question is, does the Dibble 8 screen and look at those comprehension skills for the older students?
Yes, that's a great question. So there are a series of assessments. This data is the composite score. So when you look at all of the breakdown of all the different pieces of Dibbles, every year what's given to the students is based on developmentally appropriate reading instruction. So by the time they're at that 5th grade level, there's a comprehensive piece added to it so that they can use that. And they do continue to screen for some of those foundational phonics skills, but at the 5th grade level. So you start looking at what are those, how the language shifts, multisyllabic words, like different things. Can they still break down those pieces, but then also be able to apply the comprehension to it? So the assessment, these scores are the full composite score, but I could show you individual data breaks down by the grade level of the different tests that are given at each level.
That would be helpful. And how does the free version differ if we were paying for the assessment?
Great question. So the free version is just giving you this picture. So what we're currently doing is we give the assessments one-on-one. That wouldn't look different. Like the importance of the teacher and the student sitting down to administer these assessments wouldn't change. Currently, in our current structure, that the classroom teachers enters each score into a spreadsheet. And then that gives us data that we can enter into our housing system that's just pretty much raw data that can summarize like this. M-Class then takes that data and then gives like suggested activities or suggestive interventions based on the trends that they're seeing with the students. So it helps make sure that the interventions that are provided are appropriate based on the database that they have related to seeing struggles like that. Right now, our tools are just really giving us raw data.
And how often are the students getting?
Great question, 3 times a year. So we are currently in the mid-year Dibbles data collection. So I'm very anxious to see what that will look like after the next couple of weeks when we can see that. So certainly at my next presentation, I can give you an update on what our middle scores look like.
I didn't see any data other than the X diagnostic.
Mhm.
The students are taking that individually. Am I
Correct.
Correct.
Yep.
How many times are they sitting? Is this during the instructional period, or what does that
Yep,
look
great question. So the IXL diagnostic pieces, IXL is usually actually an online tool that we are using regularly within the classroom, and there's a couple different avenues that you can do that. So in the diagnostic realm, the students need to be engaged in that for a certain amount of time throughout the time frame. And then we have a window of time where it pulls out that diagnostic piece to give us an idea of where their level is. So you can use the tool in a couple different ways. You can use it in the diagnostic realm, which is telling a teacher where their strengths and needs are, or it can be the concept we're learning today is subtraction. Everyone is doing these activities related to subtraction, where the teacher can gather some information related to their students' performance on that. So it gathers a lot of data about a student's abilities so that the teachers can create groups based on common needs and then provide intervention time within that core instruction. In ELA, we also use that to determine how we create groups for our intervention teams, for our reading specialists and intervention teachers to pool. So that data house really is live data almost regularly. Most of our students are in it daily, if not weekly.
Okay, but presently we do not have intervention specialists for math
Not
in the elementary, am I correct?
Not designated, different, depending on staffing. Some buildings have been able to shift things around to provide some of that, but it's not a consistent piece that we're able to provide across all buildings at this time.
You had indicated that you have math data, so that the data that you're collecting is from the classroom teachers primarily, from the diagnostic piece.
Correct. Yeah.
But pretty much that's happening within the class.
Yeah, same process. So for our data, the use of IXL, for example, is done 3 times a year, similarly to the screeners, where we have that data pulled out to see if the diagnostic piece to help drive the instruction. And teachers can go into that platform at any point and see student progress. They can see trends for their class. They can see an individual student's progress. So that data is readily available throughout the year. So that example, I'm still in ELA, but that math example, we use that platform for both our ELA and math instruction to help guide our work throughout the year, that it's not just one-time assessments, it's done regularly and short bursts. It's not like hours long, it's short bursts to make sure we have a finger on the pulse of how our students are doing. You're welcome. Any other questions? Okay. So I just wanted to also give you an update with Magic School AI and AI in general and kind of where we are with the AI committee. So for your investment last year, we talked about in June, purchasing Magic School for this school year. So I wanted to give you an update on the use and types of tools that we've been using. And so this image shows you just general usage. So you can see a big spike in October that classroom teachers had a lot of generations, a lot of use on Magic School. Part of the reason for that spike is we did have a professional learning day in that month that we had all teachers engaging using Magic School to make sure they're comfortable with it. So we're continuing to embed that, and December's trend went down a little bit. I think a lot of it has to do with the holidays, and in general, we see some usage of new things going down as we're keeping students engaged. But this is an example of the types of things that teachers are using Magic School for. So it just gives you an idea of the different types of resources that teachers have been able to use within Magic School. And then the types of things that we're using to specifically use to help generate. I'm going to put my glasses on so that I can read my chart here because I can't read it from the screen either. But Raina is, for example, is the chat bot. And I, from conversations with staff, like there's been it's been a helpful tool to be able to kind of like problem solve a little bit with resources or various things with the chat bot, a worksheet generator, multiple choice quiz and assessments. There's customizable tools that teachers have been able to use. So that just gives you an example of really the highlighted tools that teachers have been using within Magic School. So thinking about how we're continuing to use that, we are going to continue to support the professional learning and the ethical use of AI. So if we go back to the why behind why we went with Magic School, and it's really a kind of a controlled AI environment so that we are teaching students the ethical use of AI. We're helping our staff feel comfortable with the use of AI within the school setting and understanding, this is something that is here, it's something that we all are faced with, but how do we do that in a way that we have that controlled database as far as where our inputs and data is being used. So on February 13th is our next professional learning day, and we have trainers from Magic School coming in. We've surveyed our staff to look at what are their needs. So this will be a session option for the teachers to select to be able to enhance their work, whether it's their own individual use of Magic School or whether they are going to be using the student side of the Magic School platform to be able to enhance what their students are doing. So we're really looking forward to that day to make sure that we're supporting that professional growth for our staff. The other piece that we are really looking to do is explore Google applications, and Gemini is their AI. Currently, we are not, we don't have a confident confirmation that what that data housing looks like. We know within Magic School, they have safeties in place. So at this time, we are recommending that if we are saying there's a school project related to using AI, that should be done within the Magic School platform, because we want to make sure that we are keeping those that academic integrity safe for our students. But Gemini has a lot of really incredible resources within that the Google platform that we really feel could be strong resources, especially for our secondary students. But we want to make sure that we are vetting that and making sure that that is a similar environment that we can feel confident with Magic School. But so it's something we're looking a little deeper into to make sure that those resources are appropriate as we roll them out. At our next AI committee meeting, which is next Tuesday, we are going to be getting an overview of GPT-0, which is an AI detector. I met with quite a few different AI detectors and looking at, is that something that we want to pursue as a school district? So GPT-0 is going to be doing a presentation to our committee to share their capacity. I will share in my conversations with multiple different platforms, the struggle is really, as soon as one of these organizations, these companies, figure out a way to kind of help support that detection piece, an AI generated tool is getting around that. So we are going to have a really in-depth conversation with GPT-0, discuss with the committee, is this something we want to pursue with like a pilot? Is it something that's worth an investment or not, based on what we know about AI and its constantly changing world? So that conversation is just an open dialogue with that company. They do offer a lot of really nice applications that work well with the Google platform, so that teachers could use it seamlessly if it's something we feel is appropriate for us to pursue. So just wanted to keep you abreast of our work with the AI committee and our next steps as far as how we'll be kind of analyzing those pieces. Any questions about where we are with Magic School or AI?
Are you getting any negative feedback at all from the teachers about it in general, or finding any glaring holes or problems?
So that's I would say there are certain philosophies of using AI, right? So not everybody's comfort level of even generating things from AI is the same. So it's really about being able to provide that safe experience. We've had some teachers dive in and use it regularly, and others that just aren't quite comfortable with it yet. Just the concept of AI is a big thing to grasp. So it has been mixed reviews, but we wanted to make sure that we create that safe environment where it's safe to kind of play around with a little bit before we're just opening up the floodgates of any resource.
So that kind of, sorry, goes into my next question too. We talked about this before, where, as you said, some teachers are diving right in and utilizing it. A lot of other teachers are hesitant. So my concern is, I realize every subject the teacher's going to teach it differently a little bit, and so on and so forth. But I'd hate to have a group of kids from one elementary school move up and just crush it with AI and be on top of it, and then another group would be like, "Oh, I didn't know you could do that," or and then we're just kind of behind the game because this isn't going away.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, and I think especially even if we tie that back into our curriculum review cycle and looking at what resources are we using, and not just resources that we're using, but what experience should every child get, whether they're at Corbrookdale or whether they're at New Hanover, like what are those embedded experiences that every student should get? Might be delivered a little bit differently because we're all different, but those experiences that students should have. And that's all part of those conversations as we look at that cycle of review and we look at reviewing our resources and experiences that our students will have.
I have one more.
Sure.
Do we presently have a scope and sequence piece where that teachers in grade 2 or teachers can look and see, here are the skill sets that should be covered within that period, that school year?
Yes, we do. We have pacing guides for all of our grade levels and content areas. We just want to ensure that we're doing a consistent review cycle and make sure that we're not doing that review of, for example, ELN math at the same time and then saying, we need both of these resources at the same time. So just really looking at pacing that out so that we can be very thoughtful and two reasons, obviously budgetary reasons we want to consider, but also we want to make sure we're able to provide the appropriate professional development for that implementation before we're adding something else on, something new and different, because we really want to be doing it well and focusing on one thing at a time.
Questions for the board? And I'll say, I've met with a few student groups every other month at the secondary level. Magic School AI comes with mixed reviews from some of our students. So again, this is the first year involved into it with student usage, and it comes with mixed reviews. Some usage feels it may be underneath them in certain ways and so forth. And I think we have to understand where our students are and have progressed with technology on their own, and they have accelerated themselves quite a bit. And Steph's work with the AI committee and like Stout's work with the AI committee, trying to, again, we're trying to pace with that and understand some of the dynamics, so we're understanding what the learning aspects to this are. We're never going to stay ahead of what's the latest and greatest tool, but it's really us trying to incorporate a learning component so that both our staff and students understand its importance in the world of what we're trying to do, how to use it appropriately, when to use it, when not to use it, when are the aspects of it going to be questioned. The easy thing right now is, well, this just looks like an AI-generated product, right? And that's not always the case. While we may utilize AI to a certain degree, that's not the origin of it, and the ideas of it aren't always that. So it's a challenge, and we're going to continue to progress with this, hopefully in the right way, so that we know what tools we need to utilize and not be wasteful with just having certain things here for usage that really aren't going to be incorporated. We want to be really very, very meaningful with some of these things. So stay tuned as we progress, and we're really looking for feedback, oftentimes mostly from our students and our staff who are in the weeds with this and how best to navigate some of these things and what works best for everyone involved in this. Anything else with regard to any of the data, anything related to MTSS? You'll hear a few things later in our second meeting this evening. Mr. Lentz is going to give a budget update. You'll hear some of those pieces, a little bit of what Steph talked about with some recommendations. What are their impacts then financially as it relates to budget? So you'll see some of the correlation then between some of those comments from earlier. All right. Okay. I think that's all we have. There was no other public comment.
Thank you, Mrs. Petrie, for your presentation and all the work that went into preparing it. There is no one signed up for public comment period number 2.
So we will be meeting again March 10th for our next Education and Student Services Committee. Okay, and I'll be here at 6 o'clock on March the 10th. We can adjourn.
All right. No motion. We are adjourned.
For the board, we're going to